You are listening to the Mom to Mom podcast, hosted by Stephanie Sinclair, founder and owner of How to Mom. This podcast is meant to empower women and bring the community together through storytelling and education. During these episodes, you will hear stories of triumph, heartache, and hope. You will hear time-tested tips and tricks shared by mamas and women. You will hear a variety of birth stories that will resonate with all birthing families, advice from professionals who have dedicated their teachings to pregnancy, birth, and moms. Here, you will find encouragement, support, and community, because we are your community, and we are so happy to have you. Now, on to today's episode. Hi, you guys. Welcome to the Mom to Mom podcast. I am so happy to have you here for today's episode. We are going to get into the nitty-gritty all about surrogacy, which I think is such an important topic. It's something that I feel like as a society, we don't talk about enough on how it kind of affects the everyday family and just the options that are available out there. And so I am so excited and honored to have our guest, Ashtin. She is a busy mom of three, a 2-time surrogate, and she has lived in Indiana her whole life and is married to her high school sweetheart. I love that. I can't wait to hear more about how Jeff's experience was through your surrogacy.
Oh gosh, you'd get him on your podcast for sure. He is just a proud husband for sure.
That would be so fun. We should actually plan that. Ashtin loves to stay active in her kids' activities, and between all of them, they rarely have a weekend free. I can definitely relate to that. She has been working for ConceiveAbilities, who is a leading egg and surrogate agency. We're going to dig a little bit deeper. Obviously, as an employee, she's going to be able to speak to ConceiveAbilities, the mission behind ConceiveAbilities, and kind of the process for families who are looking for a surrogate and or individuals who are interested in being a surrogate. And so today's podcast episode is going to be twofold. And I'm really excited because I feel like we can really dig deep on a personal level to understand the process of being a surrogate, what that looks like, what that feels like, compensation, and so much more. But then to be able to have all of you listen and learn a little bit more about these agencies, especially ConceiveAbilities, that is available to families and potential surrogates. So, Ashtin, thank you so much for being on today's episode. I hope I did your intro justice, but we are going to learn so much more about you in the next half hour to 40 minutes. So thank you so much for being on today.
I'm thrilled to be here. I appreciate the offer. I'm excited.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more. So I read that you were a mom of three, but a 2-time surrogate. So can you give us a little bit of a timeline on how all of that has fit into your life?
Yeah, as you mentioned, I've been with my husband, Jeff, now since we were in high school. We got married in our early 20s and then quickly started our family. Something that was always passionate for me was to be a mom. So I knew that I wanted to start my family pretty early on in our marriage. We had been together so long that it just kind of felt like the natural step anyway for us. So my oldest, Mason, he just turned 11. And so he was kind of our, perfect child, if you will, the one that makes you want to have more kids because he's so easy and he's so sweet and so cute. And then soon after, we did get pregnant again and unfortunately lost that pregnancy in a miscarriage, which
I'm so sorry.
Is tough, but also like kind of helped spark this fire in me of like how important families are and kind of what it means for me. And as hard as it was, I'm a very open book. And so I feel like me going through that was something that I could share and use to kind of help others. And so as I navigated through that loss, I got pregnant again with my middle son, Brooks, who just turned 9. and he's had his own sets of challenges as he was diagnosed with CP. And so walking through that line with him has been interesting in its own set of things. But again, just establishing like how important family is, and kind of grounds us and lets us know that everyone has challenges, different challenges, but walking through that with him. And then finally having our daughter Gracie, who is now 7. She runs the house. She she is definitely
I love it.
a girl that likes to have things her way. But again, just kind of having them and just making me feel whole with my
Mhm.
kids. And after our daughter was born, my husband was pretty much like, listen, I know that you love to be pregnant. I
Mhm.
just think that our family is complete. And while it was sad to kind of close that chapter, it just sparked this whole thing in me of this is the time to pursue surrogacy. And it was actually something that I've always considered doing.
Okay.
Um, Really, even early on in our marriage, and my husband knew that this was something that, not that I knew a lot about it, but that I needed to be a part of it in some way, shape, or form. So after my husband had said, like, listen, after Gracie turned a year, we had decided, okay, our family's complete. He scheduled to have his vasectomy, and I applied to be a surrogate. So it's
New
like,
chapter.
yeah, right. Like you do that, and I'll do this, and was
Yeah.
kind of full steam ahead from that point.
Well, and I can imagine too, just going through that, brief time of miscarrying and just having that feeling that I'm sure so many families have that are looking for surrogacy, of that like want and desire. And when you want something so bad and you just feel like it's been placed in your heart since you were a child, that like you always envisioned being a mom. And just from a mom who's been through infertility, it's like, when you want something so bad and it's out of reach, there's nothing
Right.
more frustrating and truly depressing than
Yeah.
kind of going through that experience. So I'm sure you already kind of had this idea of wanting to be a part of this
Mhm.
early on, but I'm sure that helped kind of dig a little bit deeper and give that mission a little bit of a stronger nudge of wanting to be a surrogate for families in the future.
Yeah, and I think that after having a successful pregnancy with Mason, and being so protective of that pregnancy early on, and not wanting to announce because the risk of miscarriage and all these things,
Mhm.
and so then when that went beautifully, and to get pregnant again, and then to announce right away, right? Like we just
Right.
assumed like everything's going to go great, and so I feel like having to then tell everyone, we had announced so early, and so it was one of those things where it was like, gosh, like I wasn't upset that we announced, because like I said, I like to share my story, and I'm a very independent, strong person, and so I feel like I could help others. But yes, exactly, like ingrained in how many intended moms that we work with, every single day, that my loss, my one loss, is nothing compared to their multiple losses. Or like you said, it's at this point, without the surrogate, it's an intangible thing for them. They really are, it's out of reach. Exactly.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit more about ConceiveAbilities
Yeah.
before we get into your stories around surrogacy. So give us a
Mhm.
little bit more background information about the agency, their mission, and how they go about helping families and finding surrogates for these families.
Honestly, like beaming ear to ear when we talk about ConceiveAbilities. If I could express how at home I feel with this agency, there really isn't another word to describe it. I think that, not only does our experience speak for itself in the 25 years that we've been around, not only with a donation, but then surrogacy as well. NASCA has done an amazing job building this foundation and this passion behind, what makes strong, empowered women, and how can we help strong, empowered women, families. It doesn't have to be a woman who's struggling to
Mhm.
conceive. It could be, a same-sex couple. Without a woman, they can't have their own children. So again, there's lots of avenues, and we're here to help everyone. It's not specific to who you are. We want to be open and inclusive of everyone. And so I think that what sets ConceiveAbilities apart is this foundation of partnership.
Mhm.
Not only are we partners with each other as coworkers, but we're also partnered with our intended parents and our surrogates, right? We're a very much surrogate focused agency in the sense that we totally understand what you as an individual are going through for yourself and for your family. And we appreciate that. And we want the surrogate to know how much we value their time and effort throughout this process. And without them, we don't have intended parents and we can't
Mhm.
help bridge this gap of building families. So for me, it's huge and instrumental to be a part of such an amazing world. And we call it our surrogate sisterhood here at ConceiveAbilities. And
Okay.
um, as cliche as it sounds, it's exactly what it is. It is a tight group of women who are open and vulnerable. And I
Mhm.
really do share the passion that ConceiveAbilities spreads, not only in the work we do for intended parents, egg donations, surrogates, milk bank challenges to help, when we had the formula shortage, all the things, but we are really making leaps and bounds, strides in making sure that families are protected and advocated for.
That's amazing. And I think it's important too for our listeners to hear that you guys help both intended parents
Mhm.
and help finding the surrogates and working with them. And I know I spoke with Kelly about this a couple times, but just how close that working relationship is with the surrogate so that they feel like their questions are answered, that their needs are met, that communication is wide open on both ends. I think it's just huge to know that there's just as much support for the intended parents as there is for the surrogates as well. And so, can you let our listeners know if they are intended parents that are dreaming of having another baby enter this world, but they need the assistance of a surrogate, or maybe a listener is interested in, just exploring the option of potentially being a surrogate and has questions? What are the first steps that they take to just kind of brainstorm and chat with somebody at ConceiveAbilities?
Yeah, that's exactly what it would be, right? So it is a chat essentially, and we have separate teams, right? For each
Hmm.
intended parents would have their dedicated person that they would reach out to, have a meeting, discuss their kind of what their hopes and dreams are as far as building a family, and the same with a surrogate, right? We have a wealth of information on our webpage where they can go and like just find out whether you qualify or not in a few basic questions, which I do love. I think that again, it sets us apart. Other agencies will give you this 100 list questionnaire, right? Like you're filling out this long, in depth thing, and then they decide whether or not you qualified or not. We have Nazca's vision is that in mom can fill out a surrogate application with a baby on her hip in 2 minutes or less, right? Just make it quick and easy. But not only do I love that, I love the fact that this allows us to give each surrogate an individual review of their medical history at one-on-one conversation. I want to hear you. I want to talk to you. I want to learn about you. I don't want to read about everything and then have the conversation. I feel like since COVID, we're such a virtual world, and it's so nice to be able to have those one-on-one connections with surrogates that walk through the door for us. I think probably one of my taglines is just as much about the surrogate through this process as it is the intended parents. This is your story. This is your process too, and we want you to feel like you have a friend at the agency. And I do think that that speaks volumes for the intended parent as well. I think that that's again what sets us apart is this relationship that we build. That's the foundation of a good partnership, is having open lines of communication, someone that you can rely on and contact and be available to you.
Okay, you guys, we're going to take just a brief break so I can tell you all about an amazing company, Body Ready Method. Body Ready Method is an amazing company that offers pregnancy and postpartum programs. I urge you to take a look at this, especially if you are wanting to stay active during your pregnancy and prepare for labor and delivery. This is also a great program to help heal and recover your body post-birth. You can go to howtomom.com/links and follow the Body Ready Method link from there. Okay, back to today's episode. I love that. And I just feel like too, so much more can be covered in a more
Mhm.
in-depth manner when you're having
Yes.
a conversation with somebody. Not only is it just more efficient to have a couple questions to just see if that conversation is going to take place, but then jump on the call versus trying to
Absolutely.
explain, on the potential surrogate end, and then also trying to understand it on your guys's end. Like,
Right.
you're going to have that conversation more than likely anyway. So we might as well get to it. I
Absolutely.
love that process. That's really good for people to know. So let's talk a little bit. So obviously you birthed your children before becoming a surrogate. You guys had decided that your family was complete.
Right.
Tell me kind of your story and your process kind of leading into your surrogacy journey and what that looked like, what that felt like. And were you working for ConceiveAbilities at the time, or has that come since?
Yes. So I was not working for ConceiveAbilities. I was a stay-at-home mom. And so I do want to kind of like sidebar that while for us, I waited until our family was complete. We do work with many surrogates that actually have children and then want to be a surrogate and then go back to building their family. I think that that's important to know too, that the timing, what is right for one person is not always going to be right for everyone. And so I think that if it's ever in your heart or on your mind to pursue surrogacy, definitely reach out and chat with us and we can discuss what that timeline looks like for you. But for me, I definitely waited until my family was complete, mainly because I liked that my kids were closer together. So for me, it really wasn't an option to kind of go in between. It was back to back. And so, so my daughter was about a year old, just turned a year old. And I don't know, I had laid her down for nap and this Pampers commercial came on TV and I was like, just started researching. And the second I pulled up, I started researching surrogacy, pulled up the website and applied and really never looked back. For me, I'm a big believer in like when you talk with people or things come into, fruition, it's like things are meant to be, right? Something just kind of perfectly aligns. And for me, it was that everything just went so smoothly, the transition, who I was matched with, all the things were just stars aligned essentially. And I feel like for me, that was such a strong, powerful pull that I knew my time was now to pursue surrogacy. So for me, it was easy as that. I never looked back. I tend to be, all in. I jump all in when I have my heart set to something and I'm just in. I'm done.
Well, and you also followed your intuition, right? Which we can all chat about that there's a reason why we have that. And so I love that you were able to kind of lean into that and listen to that as well. So if you could share with our listeners that process of the agency helping you find a match and then moving forward. And I want to add that this is being quite frank, but I think for me, what changed my thought process around potentially one day being a surrogate, and this might sound like silly to some listeners, but to me, it was this moment of like, aha. And I'm like, maybe other people need to hear this. But when I sat down with a friend who just recently was a surrogate, I was asking her all the nitty gritty questions. And she explained to me that this is an egg of someone else's, a donor, and obviously the sperm of a donor or potentially the intended parents, however that process works. Surrogates are literally a temporary home for this baby. And I don't know why. I guess I never assumed that the egg would be from the surrogate, but just hearing that out loud, I'm like, oh, just because I think a lot of times people are concerned or worried, like, can I carry a baby and then be able to hand it over to another family? Am I going to have emotional connections? Am I going to have any issues with that? And this is just a real conversation that I'm sure you have with, potential surrogates all the time that can potentially be a concern. But this might sound so naive, but just hearing this, oh, it's not my egg. This is by no means, no connection by any means, my child. I am literally a temporary host, a home for this baby. And that just really helped me kind of process what that journey looks like. Does that sound crazy, or is that a lot of times a concern?
That tends to be an everyday question.
Okay.
So you're not, definitely something. I think that, again, like you said, I don't know that people come into it assuming that it's their egg, but like you said, just hearing it. And so I think that that's important to establish. At ConceiveAbilities, we do not do any type of traditional surrogacy. And traditional surrogacy is different than gestational surrogacy in the sense that traditional means that it takes the surrogate's egg, right? And then a donor or the intended dad's sperm to create the baby. So in that case, yes, there is a biological connection to the surrogate to the baby. But again, at ConceiveAbilities, it is not that. We are gestational carriers. So intended parents, whether they use donors, whether they use their own genetic makeup, create these embryos ahead of embryo transfer, and then the embryos are then implanted in the surrogate. So we are just growing baby, and then we are giving their baby back. It is no way, shape, or form genetically linked to us at all. Again, like you said, just growing baby, big and strong, chubby, maybe some hair, and then giving baby back to intended parents.
I love that. I think that's a really important piece that I think a lot of our listeners are going to learn from, is just the difference there. Next question I have for you is kind of, what does the time frame look like? And I know this is going to be different for every journey, of course, but say somebody listening right now, they're like, oh my goodness, I just have this intuition, this nudge that this is in my future, and this is something that I want to do. I'm going to go online today. I'm going to answer the brief survey, obviously set up the call right after that. But through the process of finding the match and the embryo transfer and all of the processes that go into this journey, what's a generalized time frame for a surrogate?
Yeah, and that's a great question. Like you said, everyone's timeline is going to be different. But let's say someone's ready to go now. And whether you're ready to go now or whether you're ready to go in a year from now, I still urge surrogates to come chat with me. And the reason for that is because there's a lot of things that we can do ahead of the game, like collecting medical records, making sure that it's safe for you to move on to your journey. And so whether or not it's now or a year from now, again, chat with us, because the reality of it is once we start talking, I think that the excitement, it starts to build and things like that. So I would say our goal is to have every surrogate medically screened in about 45 days. And again, what that means is they've taken that brief survey, they've had their introductory call with me, we've reviewed their records, they've had the opportunity to meet with our mental health professionals. And so at that point, our goal is to be ready to match with intended parents starting around that 45-day mark. And again, everyone's timeline is different, but that's my first goal when I speak to surrogates. Like, listen, if you're comfortable with this timeline, I'm ready for you. And I think it's important to note too, and I don't think people understand the amount of intended parents we have rating right now. And it's not 100, and it's not 200, and it's near 300 intended parents that we have waiting, ready to meet their match. And so it's really an important time, I think, for this to be spoken about and discussed. But I would say on average, between 15 and 18 months is kind of what you would set aside, I would say, for a ready to go surrogate from application to delivery of baby. And just remembering that, we are pregnant for 9 months of that time. But that would be a good expectation or timeline pending everything goes as planned.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful. I have like all these questions just swirling in my brain
I
right
love
now.
it. I love it.
I would love to hear how the agency handles, or if they are involved in handling this part of the journey, but communication between the intended parents and the surrogate, what that looks like. I'm assuming there's probably some travel included for the surrogate for embryo transfer. Curious if the intended parents travel for the birth, but then after baby is born, is there sometimes opportunities for a relationship to continue, or through kind of that mental health screening and support that you guys provide, is that not suggested?
So those are great questions. I can start from the beginning of essentially, yes, there is potential travel with our agency. Because we work with intended parents from all over the U.S., we do have great partnerships with their IVF clinics. And so there is the potential for the surrogate to travel a few times to the intended parents' IVF clinic. All monitoring appointments, regular OB appointments, and delivery would be done local to the surrogate. But again, there are a few occasions where we would need to transfer medical workup, possible lining checks, and then, of course, for that embryo transfer. And I would say, as far as the relationship kind of adds into that, We want the surrogate and the intended parents to have a really strong relationship if that's what they're both looking for, right? So the goal is that when we work to match, we're looking at not only the intended parents, hobbies, locations, what they're hoping to get out of this journey, but we're looking at that for the surrogate as well. And the goal is to make this really comfortable, fluid match that makes you feel like these people could be your friends. And, it's like, how haven't we met before? That type of relationship. And again, that might not be for everyone. And so we'll work through that as well. We have intended parents and surrogates on all of the spectrums, but I would say more often than not, our surrogates want this building relationship. They want to have this communication throughout the process, and they're really hopeful for some form of relationship after baby's here. And in my experience, I still have a beautiful relationship with my intended dads. I delivered 2 babies for them. I've traveled with them. They've come and stayed in my home. I think that if it's important for you to have that relationship, being honest and upfront with us from the beginning about what your expectation is really going to make that a reality for you. But I think that it is more common now that, again, intended parents are so thankful that you have given up this, chunk of your life to help bring a family to them, that they really do value that and want to have this relationship. But again, I do want, some surrogates, it's not for them, and that's totally fine too. And we have the opportunity to match with intended parents. But I think it's most important that everyone's on the same page. Both the intended parents and surrogate have a dedicated match manager. Also a team, that's there to kind of help if communication needs to be, addressed, things like that. We are an agency that is always available. We are there from the beginning to the end, and not is it over just when the surrogate delivers. We are here as long as you need us, and that 4th trimester care, I think, is crucial and super important, and something that I think it needs to be discussed and talked about more. That support is paramount, because no one knows how that 4th trimester is going to go. No one knows how you're going to feel after delivery. But I think the most important thing is coming into this knowing that you're helping build a family, and every milestone is for intended parents, right? Heartbeat, little kicks, ultrasound pictures, delivery day, all those things are for the intended parents. And it's really like nothing else I've experienced.
Well, and I love that too, because you guys take so much time at ConceiveAbilities for both parties, that all of that is already well established and discussed probably even before the match. And then once that match is found, that you guys are still there holding hands, so that it takes a little bit of the pressure off both parties if for some reason there is something that comes up or a conversation that needs to happen. I love that. And then of course continuing to follow the surrogate through that 4th trimester just to help them and to provide the resources and support. I mean, the last thing we want to do is to ever have any, birthing person feel like they are not cared for, regardless of if they're birthing their own babies or if they're a surrogate. So that I think is really, really important, that ConceiveAbilities, just holds that to a really high standard for the surrogates. So last 2 questions, and then I want to hear a little bit more about your story. You gave us a little snippet there, and I'm really excited now to hear more. But I wanted to ask, what are some common reservations? And we've talked a little bit about that already just through our conversation. But what are some common reservations that some potential surrogates have? And then I think what's important is that we talk about compensation. What does compensation look like for surrogates? And how is that kind of established and then paid out throughout their journey?
Yeah, I think that one of the number one reservations I do feel like probably falls back onto support, right? I think that, again, because we're starting to talk about surrogacy more, we are getting a little bit more open-minded. People are being educated to what it is. And so I think that definitely helps in the support aspect. But let's just say like a partner support, right? We get a lot of women that come to us and like, I really want to do this, but my husband's unsure, things like that. And honestly, to me, that's such a great opportunity to kind of have the husbands be on the call. I think that it's so important for them to be a part of the process. And like I always tell surrogates that question, I'm like, husbands, partners, whoever it may be, you know, are so out of the loop early on in the process because it's all about, you know, the surrogate and what her medical history looks like and all her medical records, and not really does the partner or husband get involved until the mental health. And so we do have a lot of support. We have blogs and we have all kinds of reading for the husband, but I think it's really cool when the husbands or partners get on early in these calls and we can have an open dialogue. So I would say that's probably one of the number one reservations. And, you know, is this pregnancy any more risky than a normal pregnancy? Those types of things kind of come into play. And what we found is they're not, right? Every pregnancy comes with its own risks and potential challenges. And so whether or not you choose to do an IVF cycle or whether or not you're choosing to have your own baby, there's risks involved, but no more risks, you know, obviously walking through this process. So, you know, we could talk about days about all the different nuances that come with a surrogate pregnancy and things like that. But honestly, I feel like the number one driver that pulls women in is just this need of, I really loved being pregnant, and I want to help. I want to be able to give an intended family that same feeling that I had when I delivered my own child. And it really, that is the cornerstone, the foundation of why surrogates reach out to us. But compensation, I think that it's insane right now. I am so excited to be a part of this wave of like, when I was a surrogate, compensation was half of what it is now. And not that I would, you know, change the fact that I did it when I did, because obviously I wouldn't have the intended dads that I do. But we hear you and we understand, and we just want all of our surrogates to know how important and valued they are. And so we do make it a priority to make sure that we are one of the highest paid in the industries, right? There are several factors that come into play on what your compensation looks like. But what I think is most incredible about our program is that we consider ourselves all in the sense of the money that you take home and that we talk about as your base pay is the money for you to do with it how you see fit. We're not asking you to submit receipts. We don't ask for you to show where this money went. Some women don't need maternity clothes, so we're not going to have an allowance separate for that. We are literally going to make your base pay a bit higher so you can decide how you want to use your money and how it best fits your family, whether that's a home remodeling project, which so many surrogates use their money for, paying off college debt, or just having a nest egg for when their children go off to college. The options are endless. And so, yeah, we make it very streamlined. Our goal is to make it, you know, as easy as possible for you to feel confident at the end of the day. You're happy with that number. And we want people to always have that conversation with us about compensation. It's an important factor in deciding for this for your family. And so we want them to feel empowered to have the conversation around compensation. But, you know, like I said, it's almost double what I made. And so anywhere from about 48,000 upwards to 75, things like that. So that number just kind of is insane, and it's exciting time to be a surrogate for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just to let our listeners know, your website for ConceiveAbilities has so much valuable information.
Yes.
If you're just kind of wanting to check things out, they also have a estimated calculator if you just kind of want to see based off of where you live. And again, this is just a general estimate, but it gives you kind of an idea of what you could potentially be compensated for if you decided to move forward in surrogacy. Hey guys, it's Stephanie Sinclair, founder and owner of How To Mom. I'm just interrupting today's episode to make sure you are well aware of all that How To Mom offers. We, of course, are a community and a support group for all moms at all stages of life, but we also offer a large variety of services that I wanted to make sure you are well aware of. We offer birth doula services, both in person or online support. We have birth support groups with different birth packages to choose from. We also provide placenta encapsulation services, lactation services from our lactation counselors. We also offer postpartum services, birth planning assistance, belly casting. We have a registered dietitian, nutritionist. We also offer a variety of photography services from birth, newborn, and family packages. We truly have it all here at How to Mom. So please don't hesitate to reach out today to have a free consult and help us find the best way to support you in your pregnancy, birth, and postpartum journey. Now back to today's episode. I was wondering how it works in terms of medical expenses. So do surrogates just use their medical insurance? Is that a part of the compensation plan, or is that kind of unique to every match?
Yeah, and this is something we talk about pretty often too in our intro calls, which is a great question to have. So, how the insurance piece is, first, let me just say no expense related to the pregnancy throughout this process would be at the surrogate's expense, right? So, all medical bills, co-pays, anything like that related to the pregnancy, the intended parents do cover, including any travel to the medical workup, anything like that. It's on the intended parents to have those travel expenses paid for. Now, we do an individual review of each surrogate's insurance policy. And the reason we do that is because sometimes, and more often than not, insurance policies are open to surrogacy journeys. And so let's say, and in my case, my insurance had no exclusions as far as the surrogacy and pregnancy went. So I use my own insurance for the surrogacy, not the IVF process, so not the medications and the actual embryo and transfer. But once I was pregnant, I used my insurance, which was great news for me because I hit my deductible at delivery. So it was great that I didn't have to worry about that. But then also the intended parents did not have to pull a pregnancy policy to cover me. So it was a little bit cheaper on their end as well.
Okay.
Now, if your insurance is not surrogacy friendly, that is totally fine. And intended parents do pull a pregnancy policy to cover them, and that does not affect their compensation at all. So their base compensation does not change whether or not they can use their own insurance or not.
Okay, that's great for our listeners to hear that. That's completely separate.
Yes.
Okay, I think we have given so much information kind of just about the process, ConceiveAbilities as a company, kind of their mission, the standards that they have for both intended parents or how they treat intended parents and the surrogates.
Yes.
I would love to hear, I don't know if anybody picked up on this, but it sounds like you were a surrogate for the same family for both babies. So I would love to hear that journey. I can only imagine what that relationship is like. So I would just love to hear kind of your personal story.
Yeah. And again, I am so incredibly thankful to have walked this life, to be able to give Brian and Scott not only a little boy Silas, but also Sloan, a little girl. And
makes me tear up.
Honestly, I cry really every time I talk about it, just because it's one of those things that you kind of see in movies. And I remember going through the process of being like, okay, this is kind of what I want, my journey to look like. And I was so kind of fearful to say exactly what I was hoping for, just because it didn't really matter at the end of the day. But again, I think it's important to let surrogates know, like, this is just as much your journey. So we want you to be honest. We want you to give us exactly what you want, and so I finally was like, listen, I would love to work with Mitch and Cam from Modern Family. Like, I love that vibe. I want like the fun and the energy. And I always joke that I feel like my match was nail on the head. It was perfect. The second I got their profile, I was jumping on the sofa. My husband's like, what is happening? Because it happened so quickly. I basically had just gotten an email that I was ready to be matched with intended parents. And then an hour later, this profile hit my email. And it was again, so many things that we had in common. Like Brian and I both have a love of musicals. We both love to shop and travel. And Scott was very into, sports and soccer. And so is my husband. And they lived in New York. And I love New York. So it was all the little things. Brian had an aunt that was really influential to him in his life, and my aunt as well. And so there were these little things that, that trust your gut, that intuition, that this is the right time for me. And so,
everything was just aligning, I'm sure, helps with that process.
Yeah, I think that's what, you have all these butterflies and nerves, and the second that you get that profile, it just kind of melts away. And then these exciting little butterflies and nerves turn into when can I meet them, and when's our match meeting, and how quickly can we get this process started? Because again, you're so excited to kind of help them have this family. And they were absolutely incredible and amazing from our match meeting through the process. They were always so fun. We still have a chat on our phones that has like all the little emojis of the angels and all the things, because it's still super important for us to stay connected. And walking through the pregnancy of Silas, which was my first thorough babe, they always joke that it was like the unicorn journey, because everything was so perfect, everything aligned, pregnancy was smooth, and everyone in the hospital wanted to be a part of that delivery. And I was like, absolutely. I mean, I think there was probably 16 plus people in the delivery room, and there was not a dry eye. I have some of the most incredible pictures. We had a birthing photographer there. It was pretty incredible. I think that not many people have the opportunity to do this, but I want to say that this probably trumps the birth of my own babies, in the sense of like, what an incredible feeling to like hand this baby over to these two dads who just so desperately wanted to be parents. And now, because I was able to help them, are.
Well, I can imagine it was kind of out of body for you in a sense, because
literally nail on the head. Yes.
Like you're the one birthing, but when you look back at birthing your own children, you are overjoyed and you're in the moment. Whereas when you birth your surrogate baby and then you are able to watch their parents meet their baby, I can imagine you feel like you're just like totally watching from above almost, and being able to, I can only imagine I would probably be a mess.
Yeah, it is. And it's funny because one of my good friends actually just delivered her first thorough babe 2 weeks ago now. Okay. And she had a really different perspective, because for her, she's like, it was such a whirlwind in the delivery room. And she was like, it really hit her when they all left together and she saw the intended mom and dad holding the car seat and the little babies in the car seat, and like they're walking out of the hospital doors. And she's like that's when the waterworks hit, because it was like, and it's so cool how each individual person has such a different reality of like when it hits them.
Well, and how we process, right? As individuals, we process differently.
Absolutely. And like, again, all the emotions just kind of come to head, but that's really what it is. And honestly, even with Sloan's delivery, even though it was for Brian and Scott, the relationship was there from the beginning. The really neat thing about what I got to experience was, yes, they had an egg donor and she was the same egg donor, but each Brian and Scott had their own biological child. And it was really neat because Scott just wanted, his goal was to have a little boy, biologically his, and all of his embryos were male embryos, which was so crazy. And Brian only really wanted to have a little girl, and all of his embryos were girls. It was like, again, like the
stars aligned.
Yes. So it was like crazy. And so Silas and Sloan are here, and even though they have the same egg donor, it's funny, they really don't look too much alike. And it's so funny that like how like genetics and things like that work. But yeah, they are incredible little humans. They're very close in age. I started my second journey 6 months after delivering my first. So I went back to back. And honestly, like, I'm so blessed that they're here and to be a part of that. And it's a lot of fun to watch them grow. And as dads, like, they're hilarious of all the things that they're just clueless on. It's so much fun to like hear their stories. And yeah, I mean, it's like family that I didn't know I needed, and now my heart is full. And you know, I have a little tattoo, and you know, to remember them always by and have them close to my heart. And my kids, oh my gosh, they absolutely love Silas and Sloan. I think my son's screensaver on his iPad is a picture of them. And so again, it's just this family that I, you know, didn't know I needed, and now I have. So I love it. I'm so thrilled.
And so tell us a little bit about Jeff. I love hearing, and I'm sure like just the impact that this journey has had on your children. I'm assuming we talk a lot about adoption in our family because my father-in-law was adopted, and my oldest just loves to hear about that, and just the opportunity that his parents gave him when they adopted him. And so I just love like these little minds, you know, and and the
For
impact
sure.
that you've had on your children just with sharing this journey with them and then, really being a part of it. Let's talk about Jeff. Like
Yeah.
you said at the beginning of this episode, this was something that was really kind of always on your heart. And so it wasn't out of nowhere where you decided to take this journey on.
Mhm.
But did he have reservations, and how has he felt through the process?
I think that Jeff is pretty much like the best husband that I could have ever asked for. He does fit me perfectly. I'm a very strong, independent person. And like I had mentioned, when my heart is set on something, my mind is set on something, I'm pretty much all in.
Mhm.
And for him, he never questions me and he always supports my decision. So it meant no different when I decided to pursue surrogacy. I literally walked into his office. We both work remotely. And I was like, hey, I just applied to be a surrogate. And his literal response was, how exciting. Like, tell me more. Like, what are the next steps? And even now, like sometimes it's a little awkward. He's so proud of me. He tells everyone or like new people that I was a surrogate, and it's like, oh gosh, like is this the right venue, babe? Like it's like all the things. He just is so proud that
Yeah.
he got to kind of walk beside me on this. And so for him, he didn't ever feel left out of the conversation. He, Brian, and Scott have a really strong relationship outside of me, which I think is huge. And I think that that's super impactful too. When the husbands are a part of the process or your partner is a part of the process, they feel so much more included. And I think that that's really what needs to happen, is that support as a whole is there from the beginning. And I think that really it alleviates any worries or stress. But yeah, Jeff was very much like he's my MVP, and he was my MVP through the process and just there to support me and Brian and Scott through each of the phases. But yeah, he's a proud surrogate husband.
I love it.
He definitely is
one of
thrilled.
many titles, I am sure.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. And again, I think people with kids, like, that's going to be a reservation. Like, how do we discuss? And there are some really fun books out there. My kids love The Kangaroo Pouch, which was a little cute children's book that discussed, this, mommy kangaroo was going to help this family who couldn't have a Joey of their own. And so that was a really cute book. But kids are a lot more resilient and open-minded than we allow them to be sometimes. And so I think just having like a basic conversation with them is really all it takes. And they're so cool about it, and they think it's a lot of fun. And like I said, my kids love Silas and Sloan and really miss them a lot and really love to be a part of their their family. So my son just turned 9, and Silas and Sloan sent him a happy birthday video, and it just lit up his world. So again, please, if this is on your heart, just kind of give me a call. I'd love to chat. So it's really incredible process.
Yes, it sounds like it. And I think we could talk for hours because there's so many interesting kind of topics to cover and questions. But I think the biggest takeaway outside of all of the great information that you shared with us today is that ConceiveAbilities, they offer this call. Do not hesitate. Whatever questions you have, whatever reservations you have, it is a non-judgmental conversation to be able to share your heart, to share your concerns. Let them provide the resources, the support that you deserve for even just considering this process.
Yes.
I think that is like probably the biggest takeaway. Just have that conversation and know that ConceiveAbilities, like you said, they've been doing this for 25 years. Whatever support you need or resource you need, I am sure they have a long list of potential resources to kind of help guide you in your decision making. But then if you decide to move forward, the resources to continue to support you throughout the journey. So I cannot thank you enough for being on today's episode. I feel like this is going to be like mic drop moments for so many people, because so much in life that we don't understand, we tend to judge. But then if we just open up the line of communication and just start talking about it and normalizing the process, all of a sudden a lot of light bulbs go off and we're like, oh, that's how this works, or that makes a lot more sense. So do you have anything that you would want to leave our listeners with in addition to all the great information you shared with them today?
Yeah, I just think that like you had said, right? Like let's just have the conversation. Let's keep the conversation flowing. I think that, at ConceiveAbilities, we're such an open-minded agency that our goal is to never be stuck, always be learning, always be growing, making sure that we're being inclusive and understanding and valuing the people that take the time to come chat with us. Again, I think it speaks in who our employees are and just the passion that we have for surrogacy. But the voice that we all can share together is incredible. And let's just build these families. Let's just, work together. Let's partner and let's bring some babies to some intended parents that without us wouldn't have the opportunity.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And you guys, we will have all links below this episode so that if you want to check out the website or have further questions, we will have all that information below so that you can start doing a little bit of research on your own. But thank you again for being here today. And thank you all for listening.
Thank you.
All right, you guys, that is it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed. If so, please subscribe to our podcast, comment, share, give us feedback. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen, and we will see you next time.